So you get a pretty good bump then from a usage revenue standpoint.
We do. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend that has a usage-based app. It was like 30% bump just from usage in November. And in a weird way, I was like, I don't know if I would want that. It made me feel so good for like 30 days, and then it's just like, you're just like waiting to not feel good again.
You get dopamine hit and then it comes back down.
It's kind of a customer support nightmare too, right? Because there's like lots of unexpected charges, which is just part of having usage charges. Like, people don't anticipate them, and then they're like, holy crap, like all these providers billed me like 3x.
Yeah, I remember I was using Tolstoy, great app. And my bill climbed over a K. I was like, wait, this just does videos on my site. This is way too expensive. I churned so fast, but I didn't complain. I was like, you know what, it's what it costs. But yeah, I churned very quickly.
That's interesting. When I took over Stamped, one of the first things I did was killed usage charges. I just feel like for certain things it makes sense, but what we're talking about, a software that collects and shows reviews on your website, I just didn't think that the idea of usage charges was good. And my general philosophy and pricing is I don't want my customers to think about the bill. I just want them to pay it. The more they think about it, the more conversation it has, the more they start thinking about other options, all that kind of stuff. I just want them to be so happy with it that if they ever do look at the bill, they say that makes sense, but they're not actually actively thinking about it.
How does Stamped scale pricing?
Currently, it's order volume based. Or sorry, I should clarify that. I didn't say that exactly right. I killed overage charges, so you don't get charged extra if you go over your plan limit. It just doesn't send it out, and eventually, we'll waive it for people oftentimes. So, like, if somebody has like a big Black Friday, for example, we're just going to process that stuff for you. But if you start to like really scale over time, then we're going to ask you to raise your plan. But I still don't love that model. I get it. I understand why it exists. And right now, honestly, I just don't have, it's not my biggest concern, the pricing model. But eventually I want to completely reevaluate that as well.
It's a huge topic for us because we're redoing our entire pricing model right now. We're kind of in the same boat.
Interesting.
Yeah, we also price based on order volume. And like you said, certain products it makes sense to charge usage or based on volume, but you kind of have to be in that infrastructure type category, which we are. Maybe less so for reviews, I guess, right? But we do want to move it over to more product tiers and flat pricing. The usage model doesn't, it causes a lot of conflict. And the other thing is that we're looking at scaling outside of Shopify. And so when you're talking about orders and then you go into lead gen, how do you price that? Like, not really transferable.
Yeah, it's also just like what I always found was that the difference between two Shopify stores can be like drastically different, right? Like order volume on like fitness equipment versus skincare is like, okay, that order is like worth so much more, but then it's also like, okay, are you gonna like just like based on revenue, and it's like now I'm taking a piece of your business? I mean, none of them are great. Like even we used to use this search tool called Algolia in our app, and it was like incredible. It's like an incredible search infrastructure, but like their pricing model just like doesn't at all make sense for our business, and it's just like, oh, like I wish you just had something that like made sense for our use case, because like the product is great, it just like like the puzzle pieces don't fit together. But I guess that also just comes down to like refining your ICP, right? And it's just like, yeah, we're potentially just not even supposed to be a customer. But
pricing is always one of those things that you can't make everybody happy.
Yeah, that's impossible. That's the thing that if you've never built software, you don't understand the challenge of pricing. Because it's like your costs are, when you have a physical good, you can pretty easily associate the cost. If you're ordering 1,000 of something, you can pretty easily associate the costs that are, allocate the cost to that depending on what you need. But when it comes to software, it's totally different. And one customer, the cost of servicing that customer is completely different than another customer. So
And
yeah,
and not always tangibly.
correct. Yeah, it's not always size of business. It can be just like the questions they have, the things that they need or want. Some customers bring you benefits too, right? Like some of them will go out and sing praises about your product, and it's like, okay, well, we give that person something for free, but then that doesn't feel fair to everybody else. So it's just like this. It's a very challenging topic for sure.
What's top of mind for you guys of like a software that you pay for in which you wish was 10 times cheaper versus something that you pay for that you're like, I'd be willing to pay 10 times more?
You know what's funny is I don't think that there's anything that I buy that I have an opinion on their pricing. I'm not just like saying that to be like wishful of how people think about us. I literally don't. Like the market is so good at creating options that I don't think about it from a pricing point of view. I'm just like, I just won't use you. Or I will use you. You know, it's like not, it's like oddly, I've actually not thought that.
But it's a factor.
I guess an example would be HubSpot. You know, HubSpot's expensive. There's alternatives out there. A lot of people are kind of locked into HubSpot, and I can see churn increasing for HubSpot over time unless they manage to make themselves more defensible. There are other options out there, right? And increasingly, more and more options that are just as well integrated. And then I don't know, Google Suite.
But I think that's different from saying like, hey Jack, I was just going to ask you, but like you would just look at the alternative. Like saying, hey, HubSpot, you should be cheaper. Is that how you think about that? Or is it just like, hey, I'm going to look at Adio?
No, I just wish it was because it's so expensive.
Are you like in my Slack or something? Because like I'm going to churn off of HubSpot onto Adio Monday.
No way.
Just looking at
but
it
isn't
too.
that good?
Yeah, but it's not a pricing thing. It's a I fucking hate HubSpot as a product. It's
But
the
dude, I think
ugliest,
that's
stupidest
good.
piece of software I've ever met, and you need 3 full-time employees to get any value from it. We're using this software. I hate it. I hate HubSpot.
Dude, isn't that good? Like, I don't know.
I mean, it's not good because like now I have to do the work to like get off of HubSpot, and I thought when I like initially got HubSpot, I'm like okay, like I'm growing up, I'm like getting the thing that everyone says you're supposed to have, and I despise every single product decision in that entire app. Like despise it. And like at the beginning I was like, oh, I just need to change the way that I think about it. Like this is super powerful. And then like a year later now I'm like, no, this sucks and I hate it. And I mean, okay, so for something I would pay 10 times more for and never look for an alternative, Whisperflow.
Oh yeah.
I think it's the most incredible app of all time.
So that's interesting. I don't think there's a single thing that the cost of it doesn't matter to me, but the things that I would pay significantly more for than I do today are Slack, probably Notion, and Google Suite. Everything else is a constant, do we actually need this thing or not? Even when it comes to like we use a ton of AI, but even like the different AI models and stuff, there's alternatives out there. So we're not just locked into any given thing. We're looking, every 6 to 12 months at do we get a team subscription to OpenAI versus Anthropic, for example. So those are really like the
I just don't find that those types of decisions like pay out like from a cost basis. Like we subscribe to so many tools. Like we're tool heavy. We just don't even care. Like $200 in the grand scheme of it, even per employee, it doesn't matter. Like if it helps them to save an hour, let's go. We subscribe to every model, the highest one that they can, even if they don't use it. I don't care. Switch them. If you like it, don't use it. Or if you don't like it, don't use it. But same thing for most tools. I will say HubSpot does feel, I wouldn't say the pricing is wrong. The product is wrong for 2025 and going into 2026.
Totally.
And so when you look at other tools that are more lightweight, I just read something on Twitter and somebody was saying that they switched from HubSpot marketing, which I think is the biggest pain point in HubSpot, the marketing and the emails. It's so freaking expensive. And so there's just a disconnect there. And the product doesn't really deliver what you want. And so you can switch to something like Loops or Resend or just basically any email sender, and the builders are getting so good and the AI is getting so good that you can just AI generate an email, put it in there, make it transactional, and blast it out to your list. And you can build a CRM in Cursor in like 2 weeks. So I just don't see that. I mean, it's not really a pricing thing. It's just a mismatch between the pricing and the product.
Well, I was going to say, I think like my general bias is similar to Michael's, which is in a software company, 100% of your leverage is the people. And it's just like hard to think about software's price as a SaaS company, hard to think about software price when that's where all of your leverage is. Like I got,
I think that's true for like every digital business, actually.
Yeah.
Not just software.
I
like
won't share
ecom founders saying.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to take our thinking ecom. Like, I mean, we all serve e-commerce businesses in some capacity. Taking their percentage of budget that goes towards software versus the percentage of our budget that goes towards software. This is one thing I tell people sometimes. Like, I understand the pain of paying for software because that's like, it's a massive line item in my business. Software is like, I guarantee I'm spending more on software as a percentage of my budget than most e-commerce businesses are, right? I think that's kind of an interesting thing here. Like we also feel the pain of bad software, bad pricing, all those kinds of things.
Because for you, it's in your COGS and your OPEX. So like, I mean, the sort of like most obvious way that that's true is that for an e-com brand, their COGS is not software. It's like plastic from wherever. But for us, our COGS and our OPEX have software in them. So
I literally group those two things together when I'm looking at like ways to save cost on things. Those are like same bucket basic, not exactly, but like parts of it are fall into our overlap between the two things.
I honestly haven't ever spent more than an hour looking at how to save money since I've been in business. Like, it's just not a useful exercise. I'm sure I'm probably wasting a lot of money in the process, but it just feels like you're spending time going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's kind of a fun topic, because I do think when your business is growing and whatever, there's some sort of number that you hit where the revenue growth is no longer enough by itself to justify whatever profitability things you need to get. And then you have to start looking at how does cost play in. But it does feel like a different type of business, having done both of those in the last 5 years. It's very different.
Well, I think it's interesting to think about like what is actually bad pricing, right? And bad pricing is what your customers don't want to pay for it, right? And Jeremiah, you brought up earlier, that e-commerce businesses get to contextualize price with the cost of making that product and delivering it to their customers. But there's just so many different ways to anchor price in a way that doesn't really serve to perform the function of what price is. It's to get, your ICP to pay for it, right? If you have pricing that, I don't know, you have usage charges and that drives your ICP away, then that's bad pricing, right?
I think it's a super relevant thing to spend time on, like super relevant.
Yeah,
mainly
totally.
Because it unlocks
You're saying you're saving money.
It's not just saving money. Like, you're also unlocking like broader growth when you add new revenue. So like, I literally have it right here, like all this week, and I'm like kind of autistic about this stuff. Printed out, because like I also have like a weird thing. I'm like super digital, but then like with money stuff, I need it printed. I printed out all of our like bank statements from like the last 6 months, and like I was like figuring out, like, we had a lot of profit this year, so it's like, I want to defer the tax on the profit. So I was like, where can I negotiate these contracts? And like there's some contracts for infrastructure where I'm deferring whatever our marginal tax rate's going to be on the cash that's in the bank right now by another 12 months. And then while committing to those and negotiating them, I'm saving on the list price and then like getting discounts beyond that for committing. And so like, therefore, for the next 12 months, my incremental cost to service a customer could be on like large things like Cloudflare or Google Cloud for us, like 30% less. And so like, in that case, I could then spend 30% more to acquire a customer because it's 30% less to service them from like a infrastructure point of view. So I think it's like a super like really relevant thing to like spend time on. Is like,
I just want to make one quick point. Infrastructure, I will say, different bucket than tools.
Yeah, you're talking about like apps and widgets and stuff.
Yeah, Zach, the other thing I would say about that point is just, I think this is where how your business is capitalized matters a shitload to that decision. Because exactly what you said, meaning that marginal dollar would now get spent on growth, just to say it out loud, that is just not true for us. Like, and that is like the good and the bad of like balance sheet, basically, or like quote unquote raising money. Like if you have a large balance sheet, and this is why I don't know if you guys listen to all these like VC podcasts. Sadly, I listen to one or two of them, but their like whole thing right now is do not pay attention to gross margin. Like it's like pervading like venture funded startup space, like in ways that, which is why like all these companies that are like the companies that are 1 degree over the model, they basically have a gross margin that's like, I mean, it's worse than anything you've ever seen before. It's like negative, right? In many cases. And I think it's because like balance sheet versus operating cash to fund the business actually creates a pretty big distinction for how companies are being operated today. So I think it's like a very interesting question because there's like this non-trivial rift in how different companies need to operate right now. Like, let me say it to you differently. If I said what you just said to my board, I would get fired, right? Which is like a crazy thing. Like it's like two totally different worlds. Yeah.
And yeah, there's got to be a limit to that though, right? Like, so you're saying don't focus on gross margin, but there's got to be a point at which you have to at least have some idea of what's possible in your business from a gross margin standpoint. Otherwise, why would you invest in that? Given that, like, let's say there is no potential for the gross margins to ever make sense down the line.
But that's the sham, is that everyone's trying to get out before that reality ever fucking gets realized. Right? Like, that's the truth, right? Like, you don't ever want to realize that. Like, the only time you ever need to realize that is if you IPO or if you sell to private equity, which is probably an L anyway in the case, right? So, like, you'd actually never want to realize that truth in most cases.
I agree. And from the VC perspective, like there's you have to look at their incentive model, right? Their incentive model is to make people go big. It's not to make you profitable. They don't really necessarily care individually if the companies fail or succeed. They're looking for breakout winners. And so when you hear a VC promoting something like gross margins or profitability doesn't matter, I mean, how much of that is talking their own book? You just got to wonder, I think.
Well, it's also just like, it's like they might not be there for that checkpoint. Like the whole thing is checkpoints, right? And it's like, okay, like, I mean, even if you IPO, you probably don't even need to justify gross margin all that much. It's like 5 years after IPO, maybe you need to justify that.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that this like the cost of serving the customer right now, like we can say, I mean, first of all, Michael, it is 100% driven by people's own personal incentives, as it should be. Like this is, I mean, I'm not here to defend that point of view, right? I'm just saying it's true, and like it is leading to operating differences. Like, and I think that's super interesting, right? It's like it's just a super interesting ecosystem that is like getting created as a consequence of this. I think software cost is one thing, but actually even more interesting is like the forward deployed engineer or the cost of serving software right now. Serving software, meaning like us serving both between our software costs and our personnel costs, is like shifting massively. And is creating like a very big rift in two different types of operating models for companies. So,
Rishab, how do you think about infrastructure costs? Because I know we briefly are talking about software costs in terms of like tooling, but infrastructure is an interesting one because I think what oftentimes you see in software is that, like, let's say you go put Pharma on AWS, you can spend an infinite amount of money there, right? Like just adding things, you have inefficient queries that maybe somebody would have to sit down and spend a week rewriting a query that could save you $10,000 a month. Like that exists. There's opportunities like that constantly in software. And that's something that people don't always understand too. So I'm curious how you think about that in the context that you're in. Like, is it just like I could see a world in which like you start out with this thing and then you wake up one morning and you have a $300,000 a month AWS bill and you're like, well, this actually matters. But like at what point do you start to care about things like that? Or do you not ever care? Like do you guys never even go back to resolve those types of things?
Only if it's significantly more than the cost of the person who would have to fix it.
Got it. That makes sense. So basically, if your investment in the people and time required to make that thing cost, like if there's an ROI on that, then you will invest in it.
Over what time horizon?
So, I mean, this just happened. So, like if we see it happen for 2 months, then we will switch priorities and then have the person work on resolving the issue.
Right. So there's a point where there is opportunity.
Yeah. But even there, just to say the words out loud, the way we then execute on it is not actually, ideally, is not actually to have one of our engineers do it. We then go hire someone else to do it. Because the problem is the opportunity cost of our engineers' time is so high because it is revenue correlated, but you can box the cost saving problem and hire some external resource to solve that problem.
I mean, that's an interesting way to approach it.
Yeah, it is really interesting. This has been on my mind a lot. I'm actively digging into this massive AWS bill that we have and how to make things better. So I spent a couple of hours the other day figuring out exactly why our S3 charge specifically is $12,000 a month more than it should be. And I found the core issue and wrote it up, and it'll take like 3 days for an engineer to do it. So like that's something where I look at that, I'm like, that is ROI positive. Like immediately, we literally have a new engineer starting. That's going to be his first project, and he'll effectively pay for himself in the first couple of weeks on the job.
Yeah, we had this. So I'm not going to name which software it is or which infrastructure it is, but there's something that it is going to become $500,000 a year next year. Okay. And but to solve the problem, we then went and hired 2 contractors to spend 3 months on it and paid them significantly less than the $500,000 minus what it's going to cost on the new Rails. But we did not change what our internal people are doing.
We're a little bit biased. I mean, my background is in infrastructure and engineering, so we're incredibly efficient. We spend a lot of, I will say, we don't spend much time on tools and cutting costs. We spend a lot of time cutting costs in infrastructure because Jeremiah, you make a good point. And you can save 10K pretty easily just by fixing something. You can't really do that with a tool. I mean, I guess you could, but then you lose out on the tool as well. And so then you have to replace it with another tool. So the cost of switching the tool, if you like it, is the opportunity cost is really not there. Infrastructure it is, and we do negotiate with AWS and Cloudflare, and we do reserved instances and things like that. But there's a lot of opportunity. Even switching your infrastructure from one type of infrastructure to another, a huge amount of, especially as you scale, it's not super important in day one. You know, I don't know, everybody's in a different place in their business here, but you know, from day one, it's just like build it, let's get it going, make some money, and then you do get to a point where you say, oh, wait a minute, this is getting out of control, and we need a new plan to figure out the next stage of growth because we just can't sustain potentially on the infrastructure that was created.
It is wild how quickly that stuff can get out of hand too. I mean, on the no side, we do invest a lot in infrastructure and efficiency there, and my estimate is that the code base that we had 3 years ago would cost us 10 times what our current code base costs us to run, because of all the just little constant changes that are happening there to scale down those costs, and you know, adding indexes and databases and rewriting queries and moving, you know, to this reporting database structure as opposed to this one, like all that kind of stuff. Just that has a massive impact on our profitability and the type of business that we're trying to run. And it's actually, the other thing that's interesting about infrastructure costs is usually lower infrastructure costs, if you're doing it right, leads to better performance for your customers. They go hand in hand, and that's something I've been really pushing with our team at Stam too. Is like, this is actually like the high cost is indicative of poor performance. And if you fix the costs in the right way, you fix the performance as well.
It's also the only part of the business that scales with your size. More revenue, more infrastructure cost. Like it doesn't, even people cost doesn't scale uniformly, but your infrastructure tends to.
The other reason why it's important for us as well is because our actual infrastructure cost isn't directly correlated with customer growth. It's heavily correlated with data collection. And so we always consistently collect and store more data, but that's regardless on whether more customers enter the picture as well. And so like same thing for like with us, like if we had this original code base, it would have like in a day we would probably run through like our whole month's balance sheet. Like it would be impossible. So it makes the product better. It's like, okay, the more data we can collect, the more efficient we are on the storage and retrieval of the data, like the better the product is as well. So it's what's interesting is that there was one of our venture-backed competitors who like tried to copy like part of our product. And like I think part of the reason, and they ended up killing it, and I think part of the reason why was because of this like fact that it did take a lot of attention on the data sort of like stewardship and management to even get to something that was meaningful. And in a way it was like, oh, like this doesn't like line up with like our business model, and like where people should be spending time, because they're like, this is impossible, how are they even doing it, and it was like, okay, it was like iterative over time. It wasn't just like if you were to try to do it on day one, it just like you just burn cash.
I just really quickly was going to say, this is why I'm not too scared of vibe coders yet. Like the reality is that getting a prototype in the market is easy. Optimizing it to actually be affordable to operate that as a business becomes really challenging.
Yeah, I totally agree. Zach, how many copycats have you had over time?
An unreasonable amount. Like a lot of my friends that run software companies, like, dude, this is crazy. Like, actually, like, so Steven, who we had on the podcast, who's like one of my closest friends. Like I started the business knowing him, and he's like, and like my first copycat came out. He's like, oh yeah, like we have this one. And then quickly it just became like, oh, like Zach gets the most amount of copycats in perpetuity forever. And like a lot of them die, some of them stay. Yeah, I don't know. It used to bother me a lot more. I think the thing that always like makes me feel light about it used to make me really mad. But now I just think, wow, if people are really lucky, they have like 100 years on this earth. And it's just kind of funny that like they spent some of those years copying me, who is a self-proclaimed And so in some way, if you spend years of your life copying a self-proclaimed retard, what are you? Which I find to be like.
I should say this is a massive improvement. I remember one time Zach and I went out for lunch, and he gave me a description of copycats, and he said, "They are stealing my life away. I have spent my life building this. They are stealing my life away." So, I mean, I could see
like that sometimes
point of view as well.
Sorry, I was going to ask Michael the same question. I'm sorry, Michael. I don't know a ton about the business, but yeah, curious what your journey has been, and relative to I mean, all of us have a ton of competition, but relative to competition, what your experience has been.
Yeah, I mean, in software, the first thing about software that I think right now is the barrier to entry to creating it is lowering every day, and the pace at which it moves is quickening every day. And so, software has always been a super competitive business. I've been in the business for like 15 or 20 years. And so it's not changed much, I would say, but it's moving faster. There's always copycats though. Like all the attention swims to the direction of the dollar. And when something like software is immediately copyable, unless you have some incredible moat, even the big businesses get copied and go out of business. And it happens all the time. Hopefully you get big enough that you can just push people out of the ring with your size and brute force and market power. But the only way to kind of combat that, I think, realistically, is to continue to innovate products. And so, as you're thinking through the copycats, you look at them and you say, well, they're just following. If their whole thing is just to follow, the chances of them actually creating something of value individually is ultimately pretty low. And their ability to manage and operate a business is probably not all that great either. And so, you get copycats that are well funded, of course. And if you do, all the better, because it means you're in an amazing product, right? Like, dude, if you're getting well funded copycats, that's amazing for you. So the ones that just copy and rip you off, I don't think too much about it.
Yeah. It's funny. I was telling my team we've had a bunch of copycats over the last 3 years too. And I was telling my team, the only companies that you should be worried about are the ones who are not exactly copying us, because they've found a different secret. And so those ones we should study. And everyone else who looks like they're copying us, even though it's like emotionally more triggering, you just don't need to worry about. But the ones who are not actually copying you, but who are in your space, you're like, what do they know that I don't know?
No, I like those because they're not copycats. Like, the only thing there's a few small things that really piss me off. One, copying product names. It's like, dude, put something to ChatGPT and choose a different one. Like, it's like not even any work. And then the other one is product icons. Like, holy shit. There's thousands of icon libraries out in the world for free. Choose a different icon. Like, it's like the lowest barrier to like having conviction in the work you're doing is the inability to fucking select an icon.
I thought you were talking about like feature copies.
No, I like feature copy, like somewhat, but like if you made it better, I'm not that mad. If you made a shittier version and now I need to swat the flies away during a sales call on like your bad version, like if I actually have to contest and compete, it's like, great, that's why I do all of the things I do in my life. But if what you are is a fly that I need to swat away, like, fucking kick rocks.
Dude, you want to know the funniest one that I found recently for us that you'll get a kick out of? Someone copied the names of the tiers from our pricing page. So like, you know how you like name like pretend like gold, whatever, silver, gold, like we don't name it this, but let's just pretend it's silver, gold, platinum, right? We called it something specific. And then I went to that person's page and they had like literally copied it. And I was like, wow, like this is not going to work for you guys. Like, we already know that it doesn't work. So,
is it unique? Is it unique enough? I mean, the pricing tiers, the naming.
Yeah. Because not only can you see the title, you can see the bullets under. It was very obviously.
Everything.
It was very
Complete
obviously
rip.
copied. Yeah, it was very obviously copied. And also where the tiers cut off and start was like the whole thing was. It was not a coincidence. Yeah.
I mean, I'll be pretty candid. I will say, one of the first things I do is look to what everybody else is doing and then rip it. I'm not going to lie. Like, in software, that's the business. Like, you should be looking for inspiration elsewhere. But we also innovate a lot of different stuff. And so, our job is not to create the same exact experience. It's to take inspiration from what else is out there, see what's working in the market, look at the bigger players in particular, and take what they're doing and then flip it or modify it in a way that's more relevant and strip out the stuff that they wasted all their time on. So there's an incredible amount of value going through and looking at well-funded, well-capitalized businesses and seeing where they spent all their dollars and not doing that.
I think Michael, I think we're saying the same thing. I think studying other businesses is super important. Even studying the people who are copying you, because you want to know which decisions are they copying and not copying, if they're sort of doing it well, and where are they taking a different tack because now they have learned something different than you, and you should go and learn that thing. That is just how the ecosystem should, like, we live in an open ecosystem, and thank God we do. Like, for sure, that's how it should work. And so those are the people who you should be, like, people should be, quote unquote, worried about you, because it's like, yes, you're going to copy the things that are working, but you're going to be discerning. All I'm suggesting is that there's people who don't do that. And it's like very obvious. It's very obvious. It's not even like, yeah, it's very obvious.
and it's super annoying.
Yeah, it's super annoying. The annoying part is that it's like what Zach said, which is it actually makes the value of your product area worse because it's now just someone who is doing something in a worse way, telling customers that this is the way it should be done or this is the way it is done. And now they have an impression of how it is done that is just bad. So it doesn't grow the pie. Whereas a good competitor comes in and says, hey, actually, we have this different point of view. And now there's a customer that you would not have convinced, but they are able to convince. And now all of a sudden the pie grows. And so like you want, it's like a weird thing. You actually want great competitors. Yeah, but you don't want like people who don't have the original thought. So.
And they muddy the water. So like if they just say we're the same or they copy it and say it's the same thing, but it's actually not, it just makes it seem like their product sucks.
Yeah, and copycats are forcing function, even if they copy you identically, right? And they actually manage to pull it off, and it's the exact same product, same icon, same product name. They are just increasing the supply, right? They're going to introduce price competitiveness because they're probably going to price lower than you to take market share, and that's good for the consumer. And it's a forcing function on innovation because it forces you to build new features to win that market share back. So it's interesting. I don't know. I think the big difference between a copycat, because there's entire categories where if you enter that category, you could be seen as a copycat. Right? If you go into CRM, right? Are you a HubSpot copycat or are you building a CRM?
Yeah, like product category is not copycat. Copycat is someone who builds things without any intent other than to do the thing that exists on the screen in front of them. And what I always find just like blows my mind is that the lack of ability to even copy. Like, it's like, dude, the starting line was already set. And like, how are you 4 meters behind it? Like, how is that even possible? Like, it was so clearly outlined where the starting line was. And then like the idea that like you didn't even get to the starting line when it was like laid out and like you could literally just like copy the HTML if you really wanted to and copy the CSS, but you made like a weird version of the button that's like not as good as the original. I'm just like, holy shit. Like, how is that even possible? Like, yeah, it blows my mind. Just make a better button, please.
What do you think about AI and in the relation to this conversation? I mean, there's entire tools that you can create pretty quickly, category and replace and build. I wouldn't say like 100% product, but you can build stuff way faster. You can build an 80% product use case pretty quickly, especially if it's low infrastructure. Like I think that's a big category that's at risk is anything low infrastructure, by the way. But what do you think about that? Like there's going to be a huge influx of these like small indie developers, which is me basically, but also by the way. How do those relate to copycats and like how do you look at those? Is that a different thing?
I want to hear what you guys think, but I like it. I think as harder things become easier to do, leaves more time to work on harder problems.
Right? I mean, what I talked to our team about is like building a widget isn't enough anymore. When I started in software, it was like literally my second software business, I guess, was building widgets for WooCommerce. So just like literally like downloadable code snippets that you would download and install on your site. And that was the product. And I started that by taking code out of forums and basically packaging it into settings or packaging it up with settings that you could then click the buttons and this thing would happen on your website, right? Now, though, with AI, you just ask it for that thing and it's going to give you exactly what you want for free. And it's actually better than paying the $20 a year or whatever it was that I was charging for those. So I think that kind of a business is really going to struggle. That's like the extreme end of what I mean by like a widget. And then that's replaceable today. And then obviously like it's going to become easier to replace pieces of that. But I think like in the Shopify ecosystem, for example, you can't just install a code snippet if you want to do something. You have to have an app because of the way it's structured. You don't get direct database access and all those kinds of things. And so that's a little bit harder. But that's getting easier. And I just saw with the Shopify's, I haven't dug into all the details yet, but the new, the winter editions that they announced, they now have AI enabled building of custom apps, which is really smart because it's going to make that way easier. But again, that's basically like a widget, right? So that idea of like building something very simple, putting it on your site, something that you would have had to go and pay a developer to do for you in the past is no longer, you don't have to pay for that anymore. And I think, like, to be honest, things like post-purchase upsells and stuff like that kind of stuff, I think you're going to get to a point where unless there's like really meaningful data behind what's being shown in that context, there's no reason to go pay a percentage of your revenue effectively for an app that does that, when you could just build a custom app and do that on your own, especially if you've got a catalog of 3 products. Like, why you might be printing $10 million a month in revenue on, well, probably not 10 million, but $1 million a month in revenue on 3 products. You don't need some really crazy, sophisticated recommendation engine at that point. You're just trying to boost your AOV, and you may as well do that on your own with AI. So I think there's a spectrum. But I think we're just going to inch further and further into like what is capable, and ultimately this idea of like just putting code on your website and paying for that isn't going to be something that people are going to be willing to pay for.
I mean, I think it just multiplies truths that have always been true, right? Like, it's like, okay, what made really great large software companies before? It's okay. It was like some sort of technical moat. If you still have that, you're probably okay. Network effects. If you have some sort of network effect, in the example of a post-purchase upsell, if they have the data on like changing user behavior in the lane of post-purchase upsells, and your thing is automatically updating, there's value in that. And so it's just like, okay, these truths that have always been true are just going to be more true. And I don't think it really like changes much. There's just like less coasting, which is like good for the world, I think, generally. There is like a part of me that's like, wow, how nice would it be if we could all just like still make like weird little themes or something, and like have these like super simple businesses. But like I also know other people with data only businesses that you'd think would be being wiped out right now. But it's like actually they're growing really, really fast, because there's like more places for that data to go.
The network effect thing, I think, is very real. That's a very important piece of this, because even if you're not, there's, I think what oftentimes we think of with network effect is like the like disco, I think, is a good example, where you literally are putting like ads on somebody's website. That's a very simple thing to understand when it comes to network effect. But the real network effect that most of us have in some capacity is just understanding about how consumers interact with these products and brands and stuff, and how that can feed into the tool that you're delivering to your customers. And the reality is that the more customers you have, the more data you have, and the more ability you actually have to do something with that. So in some ways, that is a moat. Like, if you are starting from zero, it's extremely hard to get to the point where you compete on that level. That typically takes years or a lot of money, or some way of distributing this thing very quickly and getting into the hands of a lot of people. And I think that's a really challenging thing to do. I mean, Zach, that's what, for you guys, I mean, at this point, you've got years of people using your product and building this aggregate data set. So somebody coming in and actually doing that same thing is so much harder now than it would have been, well, when you didn't exist. But yeah, now that you've done it, it's harder for somebody else to come in and do the same thing.
I do think there's like economies of scale on the data side. Like there's certain things that you can do at scale, learnings that you can surface. I guess the question is, can you utilize them and deliver some value to the customer beyond somebody who's starting from zero? And that's really the thing that you're always chasing. Did you guys see the visual builder from Cursor? The AI visual builder?
Continue.
I use Cursor every day. I haven't seen it. Is it out yet?
Yeah, it's pretty neat. I don't know. I haven't used it like to build anything yet, but when they dropped their browser and the browsing agent, maybe like last month or 2 months ago, they just dropped the visual builder for their AI tool. It's I'm going to tell you, I think that marketing websites are like all of the WordPress, Webflow, Framer, possibly even Shopify as a UI and a builder might be like, pretty challenged by this. I don't think that there's ever been a case where I would say that there was a challenge to Shopify, but being able to spin up your own website, especially for like simple product businesses, and build something, I don't know, man. It's pretty impressive. You can like, if we looked at it, as soon as it dropped, I was like, man, can I replace my whole Webflow instance and just build a CRM and just do this all in React and just have my developers do it?
It's kind of cool.
Okay. This brings up another topic because you're talking about, the idea of challenging Shopify, for example, is, or a WordPress or whatever. Like those things seem a couple of years ago would have seemed kind of impossible. But what's interesting is you look at all of those solutions and they're really good at being generic, right? Like WordPress is it's like a good option for most websites, right? Just like informational websites. Shopify is a good option for most e-commerce sites. But those tools right now, they're oftentimes the best for specific categories or specific ways of doing things because there's just not something else that's as built out as those things. But it's becoming easier to build those things. So I look at this and I wonder, is there a world in which, like, let's say food and beverage, that somebody comes out with a better e-commerce platform for food and beverage because it's actually focused on what food and beverage needs, which is like typically they're looking at retail distribution and gathering insights about their customers and using their e-commerce store as a loyalty engine more than like an actual sales engine, right? Like there's some interesting things where can Shopify do those things? Yes, but it's not obvious. It's not out of the box. It's not purpose built for that. And I do wonder if one opportunity in this new world might be like more sophisticated software that's purpose built and just can get built faster than it, like in the past, it wouldn't have been worth doing because the investment to get there is too much. But now with AI, it might be worth, maybe it only costs a couple $1 million to get to that point versus needing 20 or 50 million in the past to get there.
You remember when headless was pretty big? Like there was a big push into headless, and then there was kind of like a little bit of deflation of that bubble or balloon. I actually think that there's a strong case for the headless economy in AI, especially since visual interfaces are so incredibly simple from a development perspective. They're kind of solve problem. Infrastructure, things that are database, data driven, all of the integrations behind the scenes, the APIs, less solved, I think, but it actually makes a case potentially that there's a future rise of headless again. I don't know. I mean, just thinking it through, when we looked at our Webflow instance, right? Our marketing site is built on Webflow. I don't know if you guys use it, but probably something similar. The first thing I thought was, well, I could just have a developer manage this and build it, and we'll build a CRM or do some headless CRM. You're like, well, why would we spend development resources on that? After I saw this visual builder, I was like, I don't know, man. I'm not there yet, but I can see the path now where you could do the visual piece, the UI, the website, all of the user interaction, and just have headless experiences with tools off the shelf that are API driven, and have the AI just build into those tools, like especially the good ones like Stripe and Shopify. They're so well documented. The AI can just suck that in and spit it out.
I think you can. I think the biggest problem with headless, and like the problem that would persist, is that constraints in a lot of situations are a feature, and the main benefit you get from the constraints that sometimes don't feel like features, that feel like constraints, is like 1, reliability, like 2, structure, and then 3, reverse engineering an error that's happening and then resolved. And so like the question is like, okay, is there some sort of maintenance that Webflow, for example, is doing on their CMS every single day? And the answer is yes, and it's like more than you could ever imagine. And so the question is like, if one of those issues came up for you, would you be able to resolve the issue as fast? And like, could AI resolve the issue as fast? And is there a proper structure in place that like you could bring someone in to like fix it? And then like, what is like the downside of that potentially happening And is it your website down for more than 24 hours, which is a large percentage of a year? And so it's like, I think we're going to be at this like crossroads where it's like, there's going to be a lot of things that are possible, but there's going to be built-in risk associated with it. And I think like we should definitely push the boundaries for it and be like, okay, let's like fuck up a little bit or something. But I think a lot of these things is just like, I don't know if we are properly seeing the forest like beyond the trees with like, if something can be done, does not necessarily mean that like it should be done, and it means it's still cool that it can be done, and like it enables a bunch of people to do a bunch of really cool things. But if we're talking about like actual things that are like driving your business, it's like, well, is that really worth like the risk for like a bit more flexibility or like a bit more cost savings? Because like I don't know, I really like Webflow, and I think that they're actually like properly pivoting in this direction really, really well, becoming like a lot more flexible for people. And like, yeah, I don't know. But I mean, I don't know. I've been like vibe coding a bunch of like really random things for my personal life, and like they'll break, and I'll be like, fuck. Now I have to fix this thing that I built to like. Right now, I've like the weirdest one I have is like I made like a body tracking app because I'm trying to make my body the exact proportions of the Statue of David. And so like I have like like you enter in whatever, and then it shows you plus and minus for like each like measurement and stuff like that. And like it broke the other day because something happened with like the Airtable that I was using as a database to sync it. And I was instantly like, fuck, like this was so cool, and now it's just a chore.
I'm surprised you didn't go for Vitruvian Man. I feel like that's the
I have that tattooed on my leg actually, but
yeah.
No, what I had done is, we're getting way off topic, but I asked ChatGPT like what the most like what is like the most widely accepted over the longest period of time like aesthetic physique for like a human frame, and they're like, well, like Statue of David. And so I was like, oh, okay. And so I asked ChatGPT like, based on my height, what would be the proportion?
I bet second place was like Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's a really high bar.
Yeah, that'd be a really high bar.
This reminds me of the conversation we had with Taylor Holiday, actually, because like in some ways you want your software providers to take agency for achieving outcomes. And one of the nice things about Webflow and not building your own version of Webflow is that Webflow is responsible for making sure that Webflow works, right? And you can just go, okay, this is done. I can focus on other parts of my business.
I mean, this is why, I mean, because I've been in the e-commerce space for a long time, and WooCommerce, Magento, Shopify were all at one point in time, they're all kind of vying for who was going to be the biggest. And there's some major downsides to constraints with Shopify that actually like make it objectively worse in some ways. The access to your data, all those kinds of things are far harder to get to than something like a Magento or a WooCommerce. But the flip side of it is that data is safe. Like it's not the way it's structured. It's extremely hard to actually break it. And Shopify is responsible for basically making sure this is all online. Whereas if you go just spin up a WordPress site on a server, that's on you to figure out. And over the last 15 years, the industry has moved to almost exclusively Shopify because of the fact that you don't have to think about it. It just works. And all those other solutions, you had to think about them. You had to manage them. They are cheaper. They are better in some ways. But it requires you to actually dedicate time and resources to that. And if you are an engineering organization, that makes sense. If you are somebody trying to sell products online and that's not your expertise, it probably doesn't make sense to invest your time and resources into maintaining software.
I mean, the caveat I would make there is think about the long tail distribution of e-com owners, websites, Webflow instances, WordPress instances. Most of those are pretty lightweight. There already exist tools for the hard parts, which is the hosting and deployment and infrastructure. And so, if you look at building on top of Rails, which are Shopify or HubSpot, or let's just say WordPress CMS, or even Webflow CMS, Stripe, right? To build your experience and then push it to Vercel for somebody who has very little tech skills, that is a much lighter lift. So I do think that what you're saying is true, but I also do think that there may be a case where some of the competency and risk has shifted a little bit. And some of the tool and the infrastructure tooling that we have now is so good and so easy to use. I mean, I'm sure you all have spun up a WordPress instance at some point. What a nightmare that was like 10 years ago, right? And so like now it's like a one-click deploy to Vercel with a React app. It's like super simple. Even like my wife could do it. She doesn't have any tech skills. So I think that there's, it's interesting. It's interesting to look at. I'm not there yet, but.
Yeah, for sure. I have to jump to end the call, but Michael, thanks for hopping on. It's been really good to chat through all this.
Thanks, Michael.
See you guys. Good
Cheers,
talk.
man. See you guys
Later.